Qualcomm had in its investor day, which Daniel, you were there. Unfortunately, I could not make it, but it looked like a phenomenal event. I did watch the whole event over videos, and the way that I would like to summarize this, it is they really showcased their diversification beyond the smartphone modem, growth and resilience. Those were my headlines. And even though, Daniel, you and I have been kind of chatting about Qualcomm's transformation beyond the modem for a long time, I don't think a lot of investors really got it. And so what Qualcomm did a few quarters ago is they broke the numbers out. So they showed what Qualcomm calls IoT, automotive, and their RF business. But what we saw was a double click into those businesses that I thought was super important. And I'll leave some of that oxygen for you. So I won't do the drill down in that. But what Qualcomm did show that was amazing, I like to call it Apple proof. Meaning what they showed is that over time, their reliance on Apple gets down to low single digits by the end of fiscal year 24. And my hope is that blows up all the memes that are out there that somehow they're completely tied to Apple. And whether it's automotive, whether it's RF, whether it's the 5 different subsegments inside of IoT, the company is doing that. And if you go back maybe 6 or 7 years, this was a major issue that investors had with the company, so much so that they didn't believe the company. They chose Broadcom over Qualcomm. Okay, if you remember that the vote was going in there at the last minute, Trump came in and essentially saved the company. But investors were literally going to sell this company to Broadcom because it didn't necessarily trust. And Qualcomm is finally getting its day in the market. Their stock is soaring. Saw some really great growth, and it's good to see. There's a lot of execution though between now and then, Daniel, that they're going to have to do. Qualcomm is writing some pretty large checks, and I mean that in the figurative way. $13 billion auto backlog, up from another 10, and some other giant numbers in RF and IoT.
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned a lot of good things, and I think my most popular tweet from the Investor Day was the one where I shared exactly what you zeroed in on, which is the Apple proof. The market had been extraordinarily punitive towards Qualcomm when the Apple stuff came down, and as Apple has launched its 5G, there's been sort of an expectation that Apple would eventually completely migrate off of Qualcomm's technology, and that would somehow be devastating to Qualcomm. And I think being able to come out and basically say, yeah, it's a number, but it's not that big, is something that investors are going to take note of. And by the way, the market absolutely roared behind Qualcomm during Investor Day. So this company is a company that's had a couple weeks of absolute terror in a good way between its earnings, which were blowout results, and then now Investor Day, where the company put some additional context behind these numbers. The other sub-story, Pat, that you sort of acknowledged slightly when you mentioned the automotive backlog hitting $13 billion, there was an announcement this week of BMW making a significant commitment to the Qualcomm Snapdragon Ride and basically their whole platform, which is the telematics, infotainment, and of course ADAS that's going to be supported by the finalization of the Arriver acquisition. That was a huge win, BMW Group, for Qualcomm's whole end-to-end integrated automotive stack. But it's really been about their adjacent businesses as a whole. Everyone sort of has looked at this as a handset company and an IP company, a company that sells its innovation to everyone else to use, and a company that makes chips for handsets. The chips for handsets part has been sort of what's valued the company, and that's why that Apple thing has always been such a big deal. But what a lot of people beyond that and the licensing haven't realized is this company has now created 2+, I'll call it 2+ businesses that are generating billions of dollars per year that have nothing to do with their handset and licensing under QCT. You mentioned automotive, which, by the way, is just going to miss $1 billion in actual revenue, but with a $13 billion pipeline. That's why I called it 2+. But then you've got IoT, which is now over a $5 billion annual business for the company. It's grown 67% this year. And then you've got the RF front-end business, which is an extremely difficult business to do and to replicate. They've instantly on the mobile end come in overtaken Broadcom, which you mentioned, Pat, growing 76%. From 2.4 billion in fiscal year 20 to 4.2 billion in fiscal year 21 with some triple-digit growth quarters. And Pat, I just want to say this because we like to ring our bell when we occasionally get it.
Yeah.
But just 7 days before, when Qualcomm's valuation was about 160 billion market cap, I wrote an article on MarketWatch and I said this company will be one of the next companies to hit 200 billion and hit mega cap status. Well, I believe, Pat, that it was like 7 days after I wrote the article, the stock went up like $30 a share. And it actually did hit about 203 billion last week on Wednesday when we were at Investor Day. So sometimes, Pat, we get it right. Sometimes we get lucky. But this case, I would think we were a little bit of both. But yeah, what a great week for Qualcomm. The company has to feel great. But to your point, big checks being written. And now that they've gotten kind of that Zoom boom of valuation, it's going to be up to them to back it up because people are not going to be satisfied if the growth falters or slows in any way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if I can do a loop back on the automotive, they did fantastic on there. I had a lot of questions on, hey, does this mean Intel is getting kicked out? The answer is no. Qualcomm won year 25 and maybe beyond that, but Intel is very much still a partner at BMW. And those are always the things that the questions I always ask is, okay, you got to win which model year? Is it exclusive for that year? How many years and what driving level? But regardless of any answer on that, by the way, it is 25 model year. It's a big win for them. And adding that to the GM win just makes it even bigger. And quite frankly, from a monetary point of view, I think the GM win is going to be bigger than BMW just because the volumes are so much higher there. But congratulations to the company.